Hello again. This is Tammy Lynn Chambers, TLC for the Soul, and we are here to read an audiobook of Flying Potion. It's a short story. It's something we've been working on in our Bringers of the Light Sundays, which you can catch on YouTube at TLC for the Soul, as well as on my podcast at all major podcast providers. These audiobooks are also made into playlists in those locations. So if you go to YouTube, if you go actually to Spotify, there'll be playlists for the entire audiobook. And I have many audiobooks out there now, from longer works of fiction, soon to be my nonfiction. I'm trying to slowly get everything out there. But I wanted to start putting these short stories out there as well. In terms of physical books, if you want to follow along with these audiobooks, all of my ebooks are free to read at all major ebook providers: Google Books, Apple Books, Barnes & Nobles, Kobo, and the link to my Smashwords publisher, my ebook publisher, is always in the notes of all my shows, wherever you're finding this. So you could go download the free ebook copy. As of the recording of this audiobook, there are no paperbacks. I'm redesigning all my physical book copies, but you could certainly enjoy a free ebook if you want to follow along with the story. And right now, without further ado, this Flying Potion is from our Bringers of the Light series, Bringers of the Light, Rockaway Point, and Tessa Locke. We have many Bringers of the Light books out there now, and they are a big, spoke in the wheelhouse of TLC for the Soul. Bringers of the Light, that's you, that's me, that's all of us, light workers, light warriors, spiritual warriors, whatever label you want to put on yourself. We are all Bringers of the Light, and we're back with my friends, my good buddies, my good little divine counterparts, soul flames, Abigail and Dakkar, for this Bringers of the Light story, Flying Potion. So without further ado, I bring you Chapter 1, Weeping Willow. Abigail picked at her broccoli casserole and made a face. Something was wrong with it. It lacked pizzazz. It had fallen flat, and she knew she hadn't worked her best magic on it. She tried to recall what she'd been doing and thinking about at 12 a.m. last night. She hadn't been able to sleep and had walked the quarter-mile to Crust Bakery to try to ease the angst in her heart. She'd gone to the very quaint shop with the gingerbread trim outside and straight back to the kitchens. Why was she still awake? Could it be the upcoming full moon lulling her with its portents and signs? She wasn't sure, and for some reason she felt things were not being shown to her. Miles away in Tessa Locke, Dakkar tossed and turned. Why was he still awake? Perhaps it was that thing, scratching at his window. Why was Dakkar in Tessa Locke, you might ask? Well, Bringers of the Light HQ had a hot lead on some dark matters, and it was something this sinister only the best agents were called in. He'd checked into the Black Tongue Inn, the sister property to the Black Tongue restaurant in Rockaway Point. Black Tongue. Well, we know that the name sounds a little sketchy, but Black Tongue Properties, LLC, was a new dark academia-themed property management company in the land. They'd been opening up themed properties all over the place, and Tessa Locke and Rockaway Point had finally succumbed to its magic. The owner of Black Tongue LLC was a very debonair warlock, and what Benjamin Black wanted, well, that's what he got. Dakkar was in the toasted marshmallow suite. The room, bedecked in burgundy velvet, suited him just fine. He had shrugged out of his cashmere sweater and slacks and had been reading a leather-bound volume he'd found on the bookcase in the room. Flying Potion by Mindy Smatherton. Something about the title had intrigued him, but so far it had been a dreary story about a girl who wanted to fly through the night on her broom. But for 72 pages, all she could muster up was a deeply chilling cat who had red eyes and the broom. Well, the broom, which coughed and sputtered gray smoke, could only lift off the ground several inches before setting back down. No wonder he was awake. Dakkar had surrounded himself with a dithering witch of the story who couldn't make anything happen for herself. "You're saying the spell all wrong." Dakkar had had enough and tossed the book across the room. From there, he'd ordered up dinner. The tray was delivered by a perky room service girl who eyed him up and down. He'd answered the door in his maroon velvet smoking jacket after having a few puffs of his favorite cigar, Mugwort Magic. The girl, Angelica, could have easily slipped inside and tried to sit down with the Dakkar, and in his olden days, he'd have allowed her in. But now he only had eyes for one witch, and that girl was 25 miles away sleeping in her own bed. At least he thought she was asleep. "You awake?" Dakkar pinged Abigail in his mind. Drearily so, she'd ping back. "I'm baking, but it's all falling flat." "That's because you're lonely and you need a good spanking," Dakkar said, inferring much more than that with his mind. Abigail blushed and stirred the cherry cobbler recipe. "Shall I come home to you?" He pinged again. "It's dreadful here without you." Her heart beamed out to him, and that was the only answer he needed, flying to her in his mind while packing up his overnight bag. Forget whatever dark matters High Court had droned on about in the last staff meeting. The only thing Dakkar had sensed here so far was the silly room service girl's wanton desire and a very badly burned vegetable tart that he'd had to send back to the kitchen. Aside from that, the toasted marshmallow sweet was a lonely excuse for being away from his woman. He checked out of the hotel and slipped into the Jag. 25 miles and he'd be with his girl again. But what he didn't notice in his love-induced reverie was floating right over the Black Tongue Inn. One very determined witch, high on flying potion, was following him home. Chapter 2. It's Only You. Abigail decided she would try again. She placed the broccoli casserole back in the oven, but this time, instead of feeling lonely, she dreamt of the love she felt for Dakkar and her mom and her friends. She took out her kitchen wand, a tree branch from an oak tree, and waved it 3 times over the casserole. "By the power of love in me," she incanted, "this magical dish will set you free." Bam! Magic infused, love felt, spell cast. Now let's see what becomes of it. Abigail decided to try an experiment. She would set the casserole as the dish of the day. Then she would watch who chose it. And then she would keep an eye on those persons to see what became of them after eating it. Typically, these spells manifested within 48 hours, so it would be like a weekend experiment and would keep her from feeling so lonely at the moment. She was missing Dakkar, his touch, his smell, the feeling of his physical self next to her. She missed her mom, who was off somewhere on a never-ending vacation, the way her mom would bake for her and tell silly stories, and her mother's potent magic, which could make anything happen for the better. And she missed her coven, who all seemed to be out on some adventure of their own right now. But hey, stop worrying yourself. Rainicord flew in the back door and perched atop his little aviary area. Abigail was thankful for his presence and protection. Rainicord, sensing a shift in the outer worlds, could tell that some of this angst was bothering his favorite witch. He flew to her side and looked up at her. He threw his own little magical spell around her and hoped for her happiness. Abigail was starting to feel better. When she radiated her kindness and enthusiasm toward others, then she took the focus off herself, allowing her guides to come in and assist. It wasn't long before things started to look up. And look up she felt she must do. She decided to get some fresh air and take a little walk. The casserole had 45 minutes left in the oven, and her little garden behind Crust was the perfect place to clear one's vibes. No sooner than she had stepped outside than she felt a weird energy around her. No, it wasn't hers. It was something or someone around Dakkar. They were so intricately woven together that often his energy fields bled into hers. There was a commotion at the front of Crust, and she went back inside to see what had happened. 2 people were waiting for the shop to open, probably just wanting a morning coffee and one of those heart-shaped pastries that Miranda had made last night before they closed. She looked at her watch and decided she might as well just open up. It was only 10 minutes before they officially opened anyway. No need to make the pair wait any longer. She flipped the sign to open and unlocked the door. The broccoli casserole timer went off, and she excused herself while the couple looked the menu over. Miranda arrived and put her bag in the back and tied her Make My Day apron on. She took the couple's order and started to make the chai teas. 2 broccoli casseroles, Miranda said back to the kitchen. And then Abigail's next 48 hours was set. She'd watch out for this couple and see just what magic the casserole held in store for them. And right about 7:30, a car pulled up in front of Crust. Dakkar unfolded himself from the tight interior, wondering why he always chose a car that had low ceilings and limited legroom. Maybe time for something different, he thought. But he didn't have time to think long about it. A broom touched down behind the bakery, and a witch stood up adjusting her skirts. The broom was tucked safely behind a hawthorn tree, while one Mindy Smatherton puckered her lips and tousled her hair. Time to get my man back, she thought, to no one in particular. But someone had heard her spells cast on high, and this time they had wings to fly. Be careful what you wish for, her familiar Mr. Sixpacks said into her mind. She cut him off with a swish of her hand. She would deal with him later. For now, the only man she had ever loved was going to be hers, and for that, she would have to do something about that perky Abigail smile.